8 dangerous psychology tricks people use to control you. If you can see them, you can break them. If you can't, you're already being controlled. There's a quiet moment most people never talk about. It doesn't look dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation, just a subtle shift in your behavior that you can't quite explain. You say yes when you wanted to say no. You doubt your own memory after a simple conversation. You feel guilty for something you didn't even do. And later, when you're alone, something inside you whispers, "That wasn't right." But by then, it's already done. The decision is made. The line has been crossed. And you don't even know how it happened. Control doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like kindness. Sometimes it sounds like logic. And sometimes it feels like love. That's what makes it dangerous. Because the most powerful forms of control are the ones that feel natural, invisible, reasonable. And once they become part of your environment, your brain stops questioning them. It adapts. It normalizes. It obeys. There's a man who wakes up every day feeling slightly off. Not broken. Not overwhelmed. Just misaligned. He scrolls through his phone longer than he planned. He agrees to things he doesn't want. He second-guesses decisions that once felt clear. He thinks he's just tired. Maybe undisciplined. Maybe he needs better habits. But what he doesn't realize is that much of his mental energy is being quietly redirected by forces he doesn't see. Subtle psychological patterns shaping his behavior, nudging his choices, eroding his clarity. The first trick is so subtle that most people miss it entirely. It begins with something simple, a small request, almost harmless. Someone asks for a favor. You hesitate, but it feels too small to refuse. So you agree. That moment seems insignificant, but something shifts inside your mind. Because once you say yes, your brain starts aligning your identity with that decision. You're now someone who helps, someone who agrees. And when the next, slightly bigger request comes, it doesn't feel like a new decision. It feels like a continuation of who you already are. This is how consistency traps you. Your mind craves alignment between your past actions and your present choices. It avoids internal conflict. So once someone gets you to commit, even in a small way, they're no longer convincing you. They're simply reminding you of who you already believe you are. And slowly, your boundaries begin to dissolve without resistance. But the real danger isn't the request. It's the identity shift. Because when your actions start defining you unconsciously, you stop questioning them consciously. The loop closes, and control becomes automatic. There's another moment. You remember something clearly. A conversation, a detail, a feeling. But when you bring it up, the other person gently smiles and says, "That's not what happened." No aggression, no argument, just calm certainty. You hesitate. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe your memory isn't perfect. And the more you question yourself, the more confident they seem. Until eventually you stop trusting your own perception. This is where reality begins to bend. Not dramatically, just enough to create doubt. And doubt is powerful. Because once you lose trust in your own mind, you start borrowing certainty from others. You look outside for validation, for truth, for direction. And whoever provides it gains influence over you. The mind hates uncertainty. It seeks closure. So when someone introduces confusion and then offers clarity, your brain attaches to them as a source of stability. Even if that clarity is distorted, even if it slowly reshapes your reality, you don't notice it at first. But over time, your internal compass weakens. Decisions feel heavier. Thoughts feel less reliable. And you begin to rely on the very person who created the confusion in the first place. Then there's the weight of silence. A conversation ends abruptly. A message goes unanswered. Not because the person is busy, but because they want you to feel something. And you do. You feel tension, discomfort, a need to fix whatever just happened. Even if you don't know what went wrong. Silence, when used intentionally, becomes pressure. Creates an open loop in your mind. Your brain keeps returning to it, trying to resolve it. This is how attention gets hijacked. Not through noise, but through absence. Because unfinished interactions consume more mental energy than completed ones. And in that space, you start adjusting your behavior. You become more agreeable, more cautious, more willing to compromise, just to restore connection. The silence trains you, slowly, quietly, until your emotional state becomes dependent on their response. What feels like distance is actually design. There's also a more refined form of control, one that disguises itself as praise. It begins with admiration. You're appreciated, valued, elevated, and it feels good, it feels earned. But over time, that praise becomes conditional. Subtle expectations are attached to it. You're admired when you behave a certain way, when you meet certain standards, when you align with their desires. And without realizing it, you begin to perform, not because you're forced to, but because you want to maintain that identity, the admired version of yourself, the respected version, the accepted version. Your brain starts associating approval with behavior, and behavior becomes shaped by the need for validation. This is where autonomy fades, because your actions are no longer driven by internal values. They're guided by external reward. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like growth, like connection, like progress. But underneath it, your sense of self is slowly being outsourced. Then comes urgency. A decision needs to be made. Quickly. There's no time to think. No space to reflect. And in that compressed moment, your brain switches from deliberate thinking to instinctive response. It looks for shortcuts, patterns, emotional cues. This is where mistakes happen. Not because you're incapable, but because your cognitive resources are limited under pressure. Decision fatigue sets in. And when your mental energy is low, you're more likely to comply, to agree, to avoid conflict. Urgency bypasses your critical thinking, pushes you into action before clarity can form. And once the decision is made, your brain justifies it. It protects you from regret by convincing you it was the right choice. Even if it wasn't, there's a deeper layer to all of this, one that connects these patterns. Your environment, the spaces you spend time in, the people you interact with, the cues around you, they all shape your behavior more than your intentions do. You might believe you're in control because you have strong goals, clear values, good intentions, but behavior doesn't follow intention. It follows context. And when your environment is filled with subtle manipulations, your habits begin to align with those influences. This is why discipline often fails. Not because you lack willpower, but because your environment is working against you, quietly reinforcing patterns that don't serve you. You try to be consistent, but something keeps pulling you back. You try to focus, but your attention drifts. You try to say no, but the words don't come out. It's not random, it's patterned. But once you see the pattern, something changes. Awareness doesn't just reveal control, it weakens it, because these tricks rely on unconscious response, on automatic behavior. And the moment you pause, even briefly, you interrupt that cycle. There's power in that pause. A small space between stimulus and response. It doesn't look like much, but it's where your control lives. When someone makes a request, you don't have to answer immediately. When something feels off, you don't have to dismiss it. When silence creates tension, you don't have to fill it. That space, that hesitation, that awareness, it gives your mind time to recalibrate. And over time, those small pauses compound. You start noticing patterns earlier. You start questioning things you once accepted. You start protecting your mental space with more intention. This is where real discipline begins. Not in forcing behavior, but in designing awareness. In creating micro-moments of clarity throughout your day. Moments where you step back, even for a second, and ask yourself, is this choice really mine? Because control isn't always about what others do. It's about what you allow without noticing. There's a quiet strength in reclaiming that awareness. It doesn't make you rigid. It makes you precise. You don't react less. You react better. With intention, with clarity, with ownership. And slowly, the same systems that once controlled you begin to work for you. You become more conscious of your habits. You reduce friction around the behaviors that matter. You align your environment with your values. You stop relying on motivation and start building identity. Not the identity others project onto you, but the one you choose deliberately. And that identity isn't loud. It doesn't need validation. It's built quietly, through small, consistent actions, through boundaries that don't need explanation, through decisions that feel aligned, even when they're difficult. Because at the end of the day, control is not something you fight. It's something you outgrow. The more aware you become, the less influence these tricks have over you. Not because they disappear, but because you no longer respond automatically. You see them, you understand them, and most importantly, you don't internalize them. So the next time something feels slightly off, don't ignore it. Don't rush past it. Pause. Observe. Let the moment expand just enough for clarity to enter. That's where your power is. Not in reacting faster, but in responding with awareness. And maybe today you don't change everything. Maybe you just notice one moment, one pattern, one small shift. But that's enough, because control doesn't break all at once. It fades the moment you begin to see it.